I'm Joe Atkinson. You're about to see an amazing presentation featuring Dr. Jimmy Draper of Lifeway of the Southern Baptist Convention and Dr. Dub Jackson, a former P-38 fighter pilot from World War II. God used this man to lead the most expansive crusade in the history of the world, Tokyo, Japan, 1963. As an evangelist for almost 60 years myself, I know I've never seen anything like the Tokyo Crusade that Dub led. It reminds me of a quote by Dwight Lyman Moody: "The world has yet to see what God can do with one man, totally committed to Him." Dub Jackson just may be that man. Watch with me the interview between these two dynamic individuals.
Thank you for viewing this film today. I thank you so much for allowing me to be with you. I'm Jimmy Draper, and I want to take you on an adventure today to meet one of the greatest pioneers that Southern Baptists have ever known. Dub Jackson and his wife Doris were missionaries to Japan and our Foreign Mission Board all the way back in the 50s and 60s. That was another day for us as Southern Baptists. That was a time where all the focus was on career missionaries. The mantra was, tourists don't do missions. The strategy was to send career missionaries. Wasn't any thought of visiting missionaries at all. Long-distance phone calls were non-existent. Letters and reports took weeks to get. Businessmen seldom ever got in touch with missionaries. The Great Commission was left to career missionaries overseas. Then Dub Jackson emerged. He dared to dream of teams of volunteers, teams that would come and be there for a short period of time. He happened to believe that people could be saved as soon as they hear the gospel. And so he came to Texas during the evangelism conference in 1961. I was there. It was an electrifying moment. He came and challenged Texas Baptists to come on a great partnership crusade called the Japan New Life Crusade, which took place in 1963. It was an incredible moment. The crowd was hanging from the rafters. When the time came for the Japan New Life Crusade, more than 500 Texans went to Japan, and more than 25,000 Japanese were saved. And it spread to other parts of Asia. It spread to Taiwan, to Korea, to Singapore. And over 45,000 people were saved in all of that effort. This was a watershed event. There would be no partnership missions today without Dub and Doris Jackson. We have over 100,000 people now every year going on partnership crusades. It all started with Dub and Doris. Now, this is a story of miracles. I mean, incredible miracles when there didn't seem to be any way at all. I'll never forget when Dub was going one day overseas, and he said, I don't have enough money to go, so I think I'll take Doris. And that's the way they lived it. They went together and always went together. And few women would have endured the things that Dub put her through. More than that, few women would ever embrace such a vision, such a dream as Dub had. But without complaining, never wavering in her support, she lived in a supernatural world of divine provision. Together, Dub and Doris charted the way for this day in global evangelism. This story must be told. Dub's simple conviction is, whatever it takes to share the gospel, whatever it takes to get God's people in the arena to reach the nations, whatever it takes to preach the gospel to every culture, that conviction has driven them for over 60 years. I can't tell you how many second mortgages they took out on their homes just to keep the dream alive. We are the recipients of their courage and conviction. When I went to Lifeway back in 1991, I began to dream a dream that Dub inspired, and in 1997 we began to send our employees overseas on partnership mission trips. Today there is a group coming back from India that Lifeway sent just 10 days ago. Over these last 17 or 18 years, we have seen more than 1,600 of our employees go on these partnership mission trips. Over 120 trips, over 150,000 professions of faith, and over 300 churches that have been planted. This is the story of the completion of Dub Jackson's dream. This story involves the incredible moving of God. It's about sacrifice that brought thousands of volunteers and hundreds of thousands into the kingdom. And that's just a small part of the partnership story. Every one of us owes Dub and Doris an enormous gratitude for their vision, their service. God planted a vision in their hearts, and they did whatever it takes to live it out. And that's His challenge to us. Whatever it takes, whatever that means to each of us, whatever it takes to get the gospel to the nations. This is a great story. You're going to love it. You're going to live it and experience it, and you'll see the power of God in your life. Well, thank you again for joining me in this time together. I want to thank you for your interest in what God has done in partnership evangelism. And I want you to meet Dub Jackson. I've known Dub now for over 50 years. It's been my privilege to be chairman of his board for a number of those years and to watch what God did firsthand. And Dub, I want you just to kind of tell us how God gave you this vision. How did He plant that dream in your heart?
Brother Jimmy, it's amazing to look back and think about what God has done. And I talked to Doris this morning about that question. It's hard to remember how it all started, except that this is it. You're in a country of 124 million people, Japan. Everybody's lost just about. You drive the car downtown and all the people flowing by, and you realize most of these people are lost. We're not going to be able to reach them with 120 missionaries. We've got to have some help. So we began to pray about how the Lord would give us some help. And I remembered a farmer back in Texas that was an inspiration to me in my first church. He didn't have a lot of education, but man, he loved the Lord. And when he spoke, you recognized the Lord's presence. I said, I would love to bring him over here and let the Japanese see what a Christian looks like. So that was kind of the beginning. And I didn't think Woodrow would come when I invited him. I said, Woodrow, would you go to Japan and share your testimony of what Christ means to me? And I didn't expect him to say he'd go. He's so bashful. He said, I'll be glad to go. And then he told me later, he said that night he got to thinking, what in the world have I done? What am I going to say? I don't have anything that I can say. But he loved the Lord in an amazing way. And we got him into Japan, and I assigned him to the Shinagawa Baptist Church between Tokyo and Yokohama. Jerry, what's his name, the pastor, the president of the Southern Baptist Pastors Conference, Gerald Martin.
Okay.
He was president of the Pastors Conference, and he was the preacher. Billy Hilburn was a musician from Dallas. And when Woodrow got up to the pulpit, he took his cowboy boots off and he slid across the tatami floor, and he walked up to the pulpit and he looked out at that congregation of about 60 or 75. And realizing that he was in a country with lost people that didn't know his Lord. His tears flowed, and his compassion reached out.
And it didn't even need a translator, did they, for that? The tears said it all.
You didn't need a translator. As he told him what Christ means to me, I have been missionary 65 or 70 years, whatever. I don't think I've ever been any more effective in witnessing for Christ than this farmer was in witnessing his first time in Japan. And I guess that's where the burden for getting more people like him.
Well, and just think what God did. You had over several hundred crusades. You had over 10,000 volunteers who went on partnership mission trips, and you did it all without any encouragement.
Yeah,
I mean, it was in the 1990s. really before the Foreign Mission Board embraced this concept.
Yeah.
And now then, in our day, we're seeing that the IMB is realizing we can't do this. And so they're begging churches and volunteers. So what you started is now being played out right now in the Southern Baptist life.
It's amazing, and I'm so thankful because I have never met a Christian or never seen a Christian anywhere that God couldn't use overseas if they wanted to be used.
Well, you've told me before, and I want the folks to hear about that first crusade and the city auditorium and all, and you didn't have any money. And tell us about that.
But they assigned us to the northern island of Japan, to Hokkaido, and Asahikawa was the center of Hokkaido. It wasn't my choice of where to go. I wanted to go to Hakodate, and I won't know until I get to heaven which one the Lord had in mind. But we had the most joyous experience of our lives in Asahikawa. No church members, no budget, no money, no nothing except a conviction. I remember getting off of the train as we went into Asahikawa and walking up toward the hotel where we're going to have lunch. And it was ice cold, snow was 6 feet deep, and the kids were ice skating along the sidewalk. And as they go by, I thought came to me, we're going to have a crusade here, and you may be a Christian, you don't know it, but God is going to work.
That's right.
And that was the beginning as we, they had a law in Asahikawa that you couldn't use the city auditorium for religious purposes because of the military connection. But I went to the mayor and we met with him. In fact, we had a little banquet. We always had a little banquet, and every place we went, invited the mayor, the chief of police, and some of the leadership of the city to come. And the mayor agreed. He said that we could go and talk to the city, the auditorium manager, or whatever you call him. I'll never forget, my father was visiting over there as a retired preacher, and Doris was in the car. And I pulled up to the city auditorium, and I thought, we're going to present the Christian message for the first time in this city. We cannot do it anywhere except in the best place, and this is it. And that was always kind of our method of deciding what to do. It had to be the best, or don't do it. And I would say to young people, if you're going overseas, if you can't give it your best, don't go. We don't need any ordinary presentation. We need God's people giving the best for Him. So I went in and I talked to the manager, and I said, we're planning to bring some of the leading Christians of Japan. I had Dr. Hirano, the professor of chemistry at the International Christian University. I had Dr. Kimura, pastor of Hiroshima Baptist Church. Ozaki, who was Billy Graham's interpreter, I had him coming. And Majima, a great Christian musician, we had him coming. And I told him we had one missionary who was going to come and play the xylophone and the organ and all. Electric organs were a big thing in those days. And the manager of this city auditorium, when I finished, he opened up, he said, well, those dates are open. I thought, well, how in the world is he going to tell me no without losing face? He just now told me that it was open. And he said, in fact, for something like that, you can have the auditorium for half price. Now, this is a story for you, but I want you to know you're standing there in that auditorium and God just performed a miracle, like turning water into wine as far as I'm concerned. When I walked out of there, my feet weren't even touching the ground. I was so thrilled that God had given us the city auditorium in a town that said you couldn't have it. God showed we could. We had the city auditorium. We had a meeting. It started. I remember the first night we had, I don't know, it seemed like it was about 85 or 90 in the auditorium. And the second night we had, for some reason, I want to say 164. Wednesday night, the city auditorium was full. By the time that first week was over, we had 350 brand new Japanese Christians praying to receive Christ.
That's great.
And we went to we didn't have a place to meet. We didn't have a church. We didn't have a parsonage. We didn't have any. So I had met the bank president, Mr. Nonaka. He was the president of the Japanese bank. I'm trying to think the name of it now. It slips my mind. he called me one day and he said, "Have you found a place to meet for Sunday?" And I said, "No, we got a lot of converts, but no place to go." He said, "Well, you can use the bank's second floor for your church. No charge, no place, and God gives it." And it was like that from the beginning.
And now you've talked a lot about Matsumoto.
Yes.
And I know his son was here recently, and
Yeah.
he'll be on the video here in a little bit. But tell us about Matsumoto.
Well, Matsumoto was, without a doubt, became my closest friend. And we spent 7 years in preparation for the New Life movement. And everything we did every day, all day, and even into the night, usually past midnight, was in preparation for presenting the gospel to Tokyo, and the largest city in the world at that time. And he was amazing. He had when he got the vision of this campaign and what it could be done, nothing could discourage him, and that was a feature of it that I'll never forget. But Matsumoto became one to love. In fact, we brought him back to the States and got him an honorary degree at Hardin-Simmons University. I don't know what good that did him, but we really appreciated his attitude and his spirit and what God did. And out of the New Life movement, after all those years of preparation, I had been praying. Usually a church in Japan, if it had 5 or 6 conversions a year, it was normal. If you had 20, it was amazing. And it seemed like none of them had any more. I thought we had a real vision that God gave us when we began praying, "Lord, give us 25,000 people to praying to receive you as Lord in this campaign." That seemed like a real test of faith. But when the campaign was over, we had 150 crusades in 150 churches all over Japan, from the southern to the Hokkaido. And when we totaled up the results, Matsumoto said, "We've had 25,000 Japanese pray to receive the Lord."
That's great.
And the thing spread out. Dr. Patterson, who was the executive secretary of Texas Baptist, and others began to help. And we went into Okinawa, we went to Taiwan, we went to Philippines, we went to Singapore, and in that spread out across Asia, God let us see 45,000 people pray to receive the Lord in less than 6 weeks. So I'm not very sympathetic when somebody tells me it can't be done or God is not able. If he tells you to do it, it can be done, and you better do it.
Now, you had one ingredient that really was unique. I remember when we were in Taiwan back in 1988 or 89, and the missionaries weren't really thrilled we were there. And I remember there was a single missionary lady, and she'd been there a year and a half, never had led anybody to Christ, and was not happy we were there. But after the weeks that we were there, she came in and said, "I want to apologize to y'all." She said, "I thought I had to learn the culture and get to know the people, and said, y'all have been here and just walked right out and people are being saved," and said, "I was wrong." So the thing you've always insisted on is that people can be saved.
Absolutely.
And not all Southern Baptists seem to agree with that.
You know, I think the thing that, even in my class here at the seminary now, and I'm 120 years old. I've been saying that. I'm not quite that old, but almost. I'm telling those kids, if you don't believe God can save somebody with a simple prayer of faith, don't go. We don't need any more of those who don't believe. But if you think God is able to keep his word when he said, "Whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved," and he said, "You must come as a child," of Scripture, I don't remember what verse that is. I'll make up one if we don't have one. But it says, if you have the faith of a child, you can expect to see victory. So don't go out wondering if you're going to have somebody saved. Go out expecting people to be saved because you're keeping God's command.
That's right. Now, I want to say again what I mentioned just a moment ago. David Platt in our International Mission Board right now is focusing on the very principles and vision that you had. You're, for all the lack of cooperation over the years, and the thing that caused you to leave the Foreign Mission Board to come and establish World Evangelism Fellowship.
You say lack of cooperation,
and hostility. Let's throw that in.
Right.
But now then, your dream is being lived out right now, and let me just ask you, what would you say to people today, now that you have to watch from the sidelines? You're not able to be out there and lead like you were. What would you say, and what would be your dream now for the days ahead?
Well, going back to the conviction I have, when I preach, and I'm rarely called on to preach anymore, I'm probably a better preacher than anybody I know, but they don't ask me anymore. But if I could preach, I would tell them there's not a soul in this congregation that God cannot use. So get up and go. He said go, and if you will go, I'll go with you. What else do you need to have God go with you? That's all we need. So I'm praying that we would see our people go in great numbers, but whatever we do, when you go, remember we're going to win people to Christ. We're not going to look at the culture. We're not going to sightsee, although you'll see more than most people in an American Express tour. You'll see it better. But that's not why we go. We go in order to see people come to know Christ as Lord. And there's not a person in any church in the Southern Baptist Convention who's a Christian that God can't use if you'll go. And I'm praying it more and more. We'll catch
well, and let me just say this, Dub, that I believe that the younger generations today, I believe are more passionate, more willing to sacrifice, more willing to tackle tough situations, more courageous, more gifted than any of our generations were. So I have great hopes. And I believe that the thing that God placed on your heart is going to happen in Southern Baptist life. And I believe the challenges that the International Mission Board is having now, and that Southern Baptists are having as we look at global evangelism, is something God has brought about to help realize your dream. And I want to thank you for all these years, for your vision, for your dream, for your energy. And I want to say that I really believe that God is going to see it come to a climax.
You know, hearing you make this comment and realizing that this is a possibility, I'm going to make arrangements with the Lord and St. Peter. I'm coming back. I want to be here to see it.
That'll be great. Well, let me take just a minute to thank all of you for joining us. I know you've been blessed with this, and you have a blessing to come. So thank you for letting us introduce this wonderful story, miraculous, divine, supernatural, use any words you want. But God has great plans for the future, and you're a big part of it.
Amen. Amen.